Welcome back to the forum, everybody. This is Cole Von Glahn, your producer, and I'm very excited this week to introduce our first recurring series, Caught in the Middle. Caught will feature an ongoing conversation between the center-left and the center-right, as represented by two of our colleagues here at the Harris School. Without any further ado from me, please enjoy this conversation on Caught in the Middle with Zak and Matt.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the University of Chicago. This is the Caught in the Middle podcast, live with Matt and Zak today. Matt, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Zak. Really excited to have a chance to talk with you and hopefully get our views out about what's happening in the world today.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you, too. I wanted to give a quick shout-out to my mother, who I'm sure will be listening to this. Hopefully a few others of you can join as well. Matt, tell us a little about your politics before we jump into some of the topics.
Yeah, I tend to approach things at the U.S. level, center-left, economics and social. I'm dovish on foreign policy. I know today we're going to be talking a little bit more about U.S.-based policy, though, so we'll stick with that.
We will. And I'm a little more libertarian for the audience on domestic issues, a little more what I'm calling a modern neoconservative on foreign policies, meaning I think we should be involved in what's going on overseas, but I don't think we should invade full scale with an army. But now that we've given you our foreign policy backing, I want to jump into domestic issues and what I think is the most interesting domestic issue of the day, if not the most important, trusting the science. When I hear trust the science, red flags go off for me, but I want to hear your thoughts, Matt. What does trust the science mean to you?
I think there's two key components to trust the science, right? One is the word trust, and the other is actually what is science, right? And so for me, if I'm trusting someone, I'm first of all hoping that they're an expert in whatever it is that they're doing. I'm not going to trust a random person on the street to tell me what's happening. And then science is another question in that I want something rigorous. I want data. I want past experience that is relatable to what's happening. And so putting those together, if I'm going to trust the science, what it comes down to is trusting the people or the people that are looking at the data to give me the relevant information.
What about when it's all wrong? I just flash back to the point of the pandemic. I think when Delta came around and there was a study done based on 800 people in Rhode Island that were in the same room because of a beach storm. And that was the study used. And it was a good study based on the data available there. And that was all the data we had. But how often is the data wrong? How do you parse that?
I think that goes back to the first component of trust the science, which is trust. And so for me, in the absence of something better, I'm going to default to that. I don't know about you, but I didn't feel prepared to make those decisions for myself when COVID first came out. And even now with COVID, there's so much information out there that it's hard to parse.
So defaulting to that is the issue that I have, or maybe not an issue, but a difference that I think is important to recognize, because I default to nothing. If we only have one study, I'm saying we don't have any information. And do you think that's fair, or do you think we should still base stuff off that?
I think you have to go with something being better than nothing. So my question to you would be, one is zero in your case, right? One study is akin to zero. What is it that you were doing? Because you took an action, right? Similarly, you could do nothing, but that's still a decision. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think individual liberty is paramount. So I wasn't about to start restricting my actions based on one bad study. So I guess this could lead naturally to what I wanted to ask. Is what is being safe at different times during the pandemic mean to you?
In the beginning, I think I was absolutely bonkers about being safe, right? I have different people that I know that are immunocompromised. I couldn't live with myself if I caught something and then brought it to them, even if I felt no effects. And so I was one of those people that was wiping down my groceries and also at the same time not wearing a mask because we were told that it didn't matter, right? I took a plane from New York to Chicago, I think like March 15th of 2020.
Yeah.
That's peak.
I went out for St. Patrick's Day. Do you remember St. Patrick's Day?
Yeah.
Chicago shut down the day after. So trust the science, trust your elected officials who decided to wait until after we all celebrate St. Patrick's Day. I wiped down groceries too. That was a wild part of the beginning of the pandemic.
Things evolve, right? And the actions that you take evolve as you learn more. So that's your point of one being zero, but eventually it comes to some critical mass.
When did it evolve for you?
I think it was probably May when I started really trying to figure out what is my routine of COVID. You know, it felt like this was here for the long haul. I'll just be masking. I'm not going to be seeing people until there's, maybe a vaccine that comes out. Who knows when that's going to be. Just
wow.
Hang out. Yeah. I mean, I took it very seriously, and that's one end of the spectrum. But
can I question the language here?
Yeah.
I don't like when people say this because I have a lot of friends on the left that say I took it very seriously, which implies that me, by hanging out with a group of friends I wasn't taking it seriously.
That's a fair point. I appreciate you calling me out on that. I don't think you were not taking it seriously. I'd say I treated it with whatever level made me feel comfortable, like I was doing what I needed to do.
What did you feel about the other negative effects of the pandemic? Were you looking into other scientific factors besides just the virus itself?
That's something that came to me probably about a year into the pandemic. I thought, once we all got the vaccines, what was that? It was early 2021, right? Because I remember waiting in line in New York in the cold, so it must have been early. Once people started getting the vaccines, I was like, okay, this is going to be done. We're going to be okay. And then it kept dragging on. And that's when I started trying to think about what are the other sides of the pandemic. But for that first year, I was fortunate enough that I was in a position where I could focus exclusively on the virus science. There are people in my life in different situations, and I couldn't live with myself if I contracted something and brought it to them, for example, grandparents, right?
Do you feel that way about anything besides COVID? If you went out to a party and, there's a risk that people are sick at any time, in any place, especially now once we're moving on from COVID. Are you not going to see your grandparents after going to a big party, assuming we're in a post-COVID period?
I think it's something that's more top of mind for me now, for sure. It's one of those things that there are certain measures that will carry over for me post-pandemic. For example, I plan to wear a mask on public transit going forward.
Well, let's dig into masks here because there was a recent study. Cloth masks might not work. Masks work if you wear them properly, especially if they're a medical grade quality. But a lot of people aren't wearing them properly. They're not a medical grade quality.
Yep.
And the University of Chicago, where we are vaccinated and are in person, is forcing masking here in a well-ventilated environment, even as the city and state are removing mask mandates. So masks in general are something I wanted to dig into.
Yeah, you wanted to focus particularly on the fashion of cloth masks, right? That's
yeah,
what we're here
it's so
for.
fashionable.
Yeah.
I've got my Chicago Bears mask. It's a little embarrassing that we can't win games, but
yeah, I think that masking is great, and this is a broader problem with manufacturing, and can we get KN95 masks here that people are willing to wear?
Would we want to? Yeah. They're so uncomfortable.
They are very uncomfortable. I flew back on a plane yesterday and was wearing my mask for a long time, and my nose bridge is still hurting today. Maybe I just have too big of a nose or something. But
you're just not built to work in medicine.
Yeah, not built for medicine. But I do think that masks are something that will continue, and so why should we discourage, I guess, people from wearing masks? I think that if people want to wear masks, they should totally do it.
Oh, I think there's a number of reasons, but with children in particular and their development, and I'm no developmental psychologist, so I can't speak to this at length, but it's got to have an effect when you can't see people. Also, there was a University of Chicago student that went on the news a week ago because he's deaf, and so it's important for him to see lips to participate in conversation.
Yeah. I'm talking about on public transit.
Public transit's great.
Yeah.
I'm talking about, do we need him at the university?
Oh, you're saying in class, do we need masks?
Yeah. It's like, do we have enough information to keep the mask mandate up? Because our base should be unmasked, in my opinion. That's normal. So now you're assuming we're at this normal of masking is normal, and we need information to remove the masks. And I'm thinking, we're a few years into this, a few years into masking. We should have some really, really good information in order to keep us in masks. Because it's an inconvenience. And I think there's people on the right that are overly dramatic about this, and they think it's the worst thing in the world. But I'd say it's an inconvenience. I don't like wearing a mask. I don't know if you enjoy it. Some people seem to enjoy it right now because it's become so politically polarized.
I think the virtue signaling of masks is a problem, but I think the wearing of masks is actually very helpful. Whether or not you need it if you're in a room full of vaccinated people, I think I lean towards no, right? If I am seeing my brother, for example, we don't live together, but we're both vaccinated, we're both boosted, I'm not wearing a mask with him when we're inside. And so if you...
How dare you?
Yeah.
You're killing your grandparents.
Well, this is why I'm also not seeing my grandparents with frequency, right? The fear is still there in that, their booster is about to wear off. Can they get another booster?
Oh, yeah. But to your point, I mean, my grandfather just turned 87. I don't know how much time he has. So if I'm avoiding him to try not to get him sick, he could pass away. I mean, God willing, he doesn't. He could pass away in a year from now anyway. Was I really doing him a favor by avoiding him all the time because I have such a busy social life that I'm worried about getting him sick?
I think that you have to balance those things, right? And it's something that I didn't even know to balance before the pandemic, right? Was the knowledge of I'm doing these things and I could be bringing this disease to other people, right? And it's honestly a new way of thinking about our responsibility to each other in society. And I think it's changed how I view my role in the collective experiment that is humanity.
It's very noble of you. I'm not there. If my grandfather wants to see me and I want to see him, I am not going to look at this 1,000-foot. I'm part of a collective experience with humanity. And I think you're part of like a larger culture of this. I've seen other people say this, and I think that's great. But I'm very much individual liberty. It's my choice. I am vaccinated. I am boosted. I had COVID. I am having a social life, and I am seeing my family. And I just think the mental drain of feeling guilty every time I see my grandparents or my parents is something I'm not participating in.
The one pushback that I would give on that,
or you can give many pushbacks.
The one I'd like to start with,
perfect,
is you're making this choice for you, right? And I respect. You want to see your family, individual liberty.
It's a consensual choice. They would like to see me as well.
I would assume.
I'm not forcing myself.
I'm glad that you and your grandparents have that
we have a good
closeness that you want to
relationship.
hang out. That's good. Good to hear. You're going out with friends, right? I'm assuming we've been out together. I saw you last weekend or 2 weekends ago.
Yeah, it was nice.
Yeah, good jazz bar experience. And so, what I would say is that by participating in these experiences, right, you're also bringing everything that you have to those other people, right? And so for me, when I go out, I trust you, I trust other people that I'm around. I don't know everyone that's in a space. And so if I am...
Are you stressing about that?
No, in that I'm stressing about it after the fact, in that my risk tolerance to bring things to other people is low. And so, for example, if I think that I was potentially exposed to COVID, knowing the havoc that it can bring to certain members of our population, I'm going to act a little bit differently.
I think every time I've gone out in the past 2 years, I've been potentially exposed to COVID.
I think that's a valid point, right? That every action that you take comes with some level of risk. And being risk forward is such a new, I guess, state of mind for me that came around as a result of the pandemic.
I think people on the right do that as well and pretend that they don't. They pretend they haven't changed anything, but they definitely are. They're taking into consideration their risk in ways they weren't before. Probably not to the extent that you or people on the left are, but I have friends who are devout Trump supporters, and before they go see their grandparents, they'll be like, I don't know if I want to go out this weekend. I'm like, oh, I thought you thought COVID wasn't real, though. Anyway.
Well, I mean, speaking of COVID's not real, right? Let's talk a little bit about anti-vaccine Republicans and then also contrast that with other people who maybe just aren't getting vaccinated. I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Sure. I think there's two brands of anti-vaccine people that I'm aware of. One, COVID's not a big deal. And two, I've looked at scientific studies, and as a 27-year-old healthy person, I just don't want to get vaccinated because I'm at such a low risk anyway. And I think that group of people that looked
the second
at the
group of people?
the ones that looked at the science and decided that the vaccine's not worth it for them aren't really discussed because I have respect for those people and I disagree with them. And I said, I think you should get vaxxed. Why not? Here's science if you want to look at evidence. Some of them don't want to look at my evidence. They've seen their own evidence. But the first group of people I think is a little unreachable. And I think something that's not in the policy conversation is how many unreachables there are. They're a small percentage. The country's some over 80% with at least one vaccine dose. And if we're dividing that other number in half, we're saying 10% of the country's unreachable. That's probably true on any issue. You get 10% of the country's a little crazy on things. But what are your thoughts?
I think it's hard to accept people being unreachable when the consequences are more dire, right? The idea of a vaccine is to protect other people in addition to yourself, right? When I went to school, I got all of my shots. I don't know what they were, but I was 5 and got, a list of 70 shots. And yeah, that's for me, but that's also so that we as a society can have our kids go to school and learn and basically have a society that
not 100%
functions.
of the kids have 100% of the shots.
But it's definitely more than 90.
I actually don't have the data on that.
So the amount of exemptions is very low, relatively, right? And so I think it's confusing to me and disheartening that we're at a point where we're willing to say 10% is good enough.
You brought up earlier that you were sort of ready to start thinking about opening once vaccines came out. And once I saw the vaccination data, I was kind of done, The vaccine